Today on the Billionaire Belief Show, we will be talking about why you're always broke before payday and what you can do to stop it. Let's go ahead and dive on in. Boy, man, I can remember getting my first paycheck, having my first jobs, and literally being broke within days of getting the check. And by broke, I mean like 00 or $3 and 14 cents or $1.67 or 34 cents. And I remember these amounts because those are real amounts at some point in my life. But I remember those days, and those were some of the toughest. And at some point, I got tired of being broke before payday. I got tired of always pinching pennies. I got tired of lashing out at the things that people were talking about that they wanted to do that I couldn't do simply because not only didn't I have the money to do it, but in most instances I really didn't want to do those things, but it was just the fact that people were able to do things that they wanted to do, whereas I wasn't in a position to do things that I wanted to do simply because I was always broke. And by broke I mean the definition of the word, like penniless, no savings, and barely any money in my checking account. And that was very interesting to me because no matter what, I was always able to earn income. And that was the secret weapon I didn't realize I had. My problem wasn't that my problem wasn't that I wasn't earning an income. My problem was that I didn't have a system in place to help me manage my income. I didn't have the knowledge, nor did I have the skill set to establish a system that would ultimately do the heavy lifting for me when it came to money management so that I could be in a position where I was in control of my finances. I was able to build real savings, and most importantly, I was able to invest with confidence, because not having financial literacy back then cost me hundreds of thousands of dollars in compound interest because I didn't have the knowledge and skills to invest back then. Granted, I was aware that I needed to be investing, but I literally did not understand and know how to invest. And by how to invest in this case, I mean, I remember being in college, having a Roth IRA account, and it was with TD Ameritrade, which is no longer in existence, but it was with TD Ameritrade. And I remember having the account and not understanding that I needed to buy index funds or stocks to, fund the account in a sense. And I didn't know what to do. So it was like I just had this account, and I remember I just had it. And I would and ironically, I would put money into it, but it was like I didn't know what to do with it. So eventually, I just transferred the money out and probably spent it on some dumb stuff. But all in all, again, I understood the importance of investing. I just didn't understand how to invest. I didn't understand how to get started with investing. And so, again, I remember those days. I remember pulling up my bank account and not having nothing, or just knowing that, man, like I'm at $22.74, but I got a whole 7 days to go for my next paycheck. What am I going to do? I'm gonna have to borrow money from this person. I'm gonna have to not. I'm not gonna be able to go and do this thing. I'm not gonna be able to engage in this activity. It was tough, and it was only because of my thinking at the time, the script that I was deciding to operate off of when it came to money. In a sense, I had a mindset focused on consumption as opposed to a mindset focused on ownership. Because now I understand that you can you can go broke buying assets. And while it's never nice to be broke, I would imagine going broke to buy assets, things that are going to actually bring value to your life now and in the future, is still a good financial decision compared to, blowing the money on expenses and liabilities and still being broke and not having nothing that's building towards your future or gaining value for your future. And so, again, I remember those days. I remember always being broke before payday, and wondering, how do I fix this problem? What do I need to do? Now, when I think back on some of the root causes of what was causing me to, be, what should I say, to be, in this cycle where I was living paycheck to paycheck, and always being broke before payday. It was, again, as I alluded to before, it was this mindset of consumption. I didn't have a plan for my money outside of paying bills and buying stuff. That was literally, in a sense, where my mind was set at when it came to money. I was just, I needed money so that I could pay my bills and I could buy the stuff that I wanted. Like, that was the full domain of my knowledge. Now, granted, at this point, again, I understood investing. I understood the concept of financial freedom. I understood the concept of wealth building. But when I'm honest about my money mindset, or my mindset towards money at that time, I still viewed money as tickets to buy stuff. I hadn't made the mental shift to start viewing money actually as a tool that I can use to build wealth, or to buy assets that appreciate in value, and produce income. I hadn't gotten there yet. Yeah, even though I was reading about these things, again, paradigm shifting. My it took my paradigm, years to shift. Even though I was, immersing myself with the knowledge of investing and financial literacy, building wealth, all those types of things, it still took time for I guess you can say, for the information to set in, and for me to actually get it, and then start actually, living, by these new principles and habits that I had formed. But again, that root cause was mindset. Again, as I say again, the root cause for me being in that paycheck to paycheck cycle was mindset, and just, again, the simple mindset of just believing that, my relationship with money at the time being, they were just tickets that I used to pay my bills and to buy the stuff that I wanted, and that was what it was. And so it took me a while to understand this, but what started to move the needle for me when it came to, always being broke before payday, and not having money for emergencies, what actually, helped me start taking control and start developing, real savings, was raising my zero. And when I think back on it, I should say, my granny actually helped me establish my zero, because I remember we went to go set up a savings account, right before I went to college, because they needed some place to deposit my refund checks. And I didn't have a bank account at the time, so I remember, saying I needed one. So my granny, she takes me to the bank, the Wells Fargo, and we set up the account. And I remember she told me, always make sure you keep at least $200 in this account, so you can, I always have some money on hand, so you're not left with nothing. So that was literally my first education on raising your zero. And when we look at it from, let's just say, a thermometer, I mean a thermostat perspective, in a sense, like, she set my zero to $200. So in my mind, my zero was no longer zero, because prior to having this bank account, I did have jobs, I did work, I did get paychecks, but I would just get a paycheck, go to the check cashing place, pay the fee, and have my cash, and just spend all my cash up until I didn't have any more money. Then again, right before college, got this checking. I mean, I got a savings account, had checks on it and everything. And again, my granny, she set my zero to $200. So I went from zero to $200. And again, setting that zero at $200, or the reason why, she wanted me to, again, to have that, set it at $200, because she wanted me to have a financial cushion. And that's the ultimate reason why you set a, you raise your zero, or you want to focus on constantly raising your zero, is so that you have some sort of financial cushion to fall back on when times get tough, or when life happens to life. So that's what I was able to accomplish, with my granny at that tender age of, I think I was like 17 at the time. And from there, like that was what my zero was moving forward. Like I would always just literally spend my money in my mind. I had money to spend, which means that I had the ability to consume and go do stuff until I had $200 in my bank account. But again, same premise. Even though I didn't necessarily have a job, by the time I got to college, we're operating off the quarter system. So I remember in my earlier college years, like I would literally spend all the money that I got from refund checks or jobs that I had, and then I would literally, be left with a couple $100 or at least $200, I should say. But I would have that money up until, let's just say, a quarter was 3 months, but within the first month of getting though that money, it was gone. So I had 2 more months to survive off of literally like a couple $100. So you had to make it work. So there is some truth to the struggling college student, but a lot of it is due to just poor money management systems. All right. So that's what I had to do, and that's what I began to see a turn in events, because I remember I would get my refund checks, and instead of just having it all in one savings account at the time, what I ended up doing was I got a checking account at let's just say Bank of America, and then like I had a savings account at the time of it was Washington Mutual, and which later became Chase. But I had a checking account at Chase, and then I had a savings account at Bank of America, and I eventually let go of the Wells Fargo account because that eventually went in the red. Because again, I usually just pull money out of it without even realize I didn't have money in it. So the overdraft fees alone was killing me. But all in all, I eventually was able to again put this concept and principle of raising my zero into full effect, and I saw some results. I was able to build those savings, even though I didn't understand how to invest. So I wasn't able to invest the money at the time, but I was able to achieve some level of real savings. However, because my paradigm, my relationship with money at the time was still that of consumption and not ownership yet, eventually, I spent the money. I won't even lie to you. I spent the money until I had zero. And it's crazy because the whole concept of raising my zero or having a zero, it went totally out the window when times got tough. But again, just not understanding how to invest, it cost me not only the principal which I had saved, but also too the compound interest that I would have received, which when I calculated it would have been somewhere in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. So that's why you need to be saving. That's why you need to be investing. You want to save to invest, but that begins with, again, mindset and how you view money. So again, if this is hitting home and it's making sense to you, then I do have a course called Arm for Keeps. You can go download that right now, and it's going to walk you through a step-by-step system, a three-step roadmap, money management roadmap, I should say, that's going to help you take control of your finances, take control of your money, so that you can start building real savings and start investing more with confidence. All right, so link below, check it out. Now that we've talked about some of the root causes of what makes us broke before payday, and we've talked about the concept of raising your zero, which for me was my guiding light and helped me make some progress moves, make some positive progress forward. Now let's talk a little bit about the actual system that I came up with and created to make this happen for myself. At this time in my life, having been immersed in the whole rich dad poor dad, Think and Grow Rich, the richest man in Babylon. Remember, I was reading these books, I was studying this information, but it really hadn't settled yet. It took some time to settle. It took some years to settle, and by years I mean well into well after college. Let's just say I graduated, like, let's just say mid 2000s. I would say it was well after 2010, sometime between 2010 and 2015, or even after that, before these principles really set in and I was actually put them into practice. But what ultimately helped me, put these things into practice was ultimately taking bits and pieces from all this information that I was learning and then creating my own system, in a sense, my own roadmap, because a lot of the financial information at the time is very, generic and vague. Because my experience was one where, again, I read Rich Dad Poor Dad, I read Think and Grow Rich, I read Richest Man in Babylon, which at the time was the first time I was ever being exposed to that type of information. And so, okay, I understood the ideas of saving, I understood the idea of investing, but when it came to the practical application, it was still a little bit clueless, because at the time, again, my relationship with money was just that of, you know, consumption. And so now that I was beginning, these concepts of saving and investing were beginning to settle, and I started to put these things into practice. Again, I ended up having to take bits and pieces from all the spaces that I was learning to create my own money management system. Hence the cash control blueprint, which is that 3-step, money management roadmap I was talking to you about. And it boils down to three basic steps, as I've alluded to. And it was earn income, stack capital, and buy assets. That's what I realized that I needed to do. Obviously, earn income. Income is your secret weapon to building wealth. So obviously, you got to earn income. Not just to pay bills anymore. Not just to do stuff, not just to buy stuff, but ultimately use it as a tool. To build wealth, to buy assets, to ultimately thinking of every dollar that I have as a soldier in my financial army, and the goal is just to recruit more soldiers as much as I can. You know what I mean? And so, like another way of looking at it is thinking of every dollar that I want to get every dollar that I can have pregnant so that it creates more dollars. You know what I'm saying? Like that was ultimately, how I started looking at money once I began to raise my zero. So again, the 3-step roadmap was simple: earn income, stack capital, buy assets. So again, earn income, obviously needed to make money. The next one was stacking capital. That was me understanding that I understood that savings was important to wealth, but it wasn't the key to wealth. What is truly the key to wealth is the last step, which is buying assets, i.e., investing. Now, investing boils down into you taking the money that you've saved and buying assets with it, specifically assets that generate income. So, this is going to be things like stock that pay a dividend, businesses that produce a profit, and real estate that pays you income via, renting it or, leasing it. Leasing and renting is pretty much the same thing, but you get the point. Now, there's other assets out there, but those are the three basic classes that you'll run into. And I would strongly suggest you start with investing in stocks. So we take our income that we've earned, we take a percentage of that and we use it to stack our capital. Then we take a percentage of our capital, because we got to use some of that capital as our emergency fund, so that we have not only our financial cushion in our checking account, but also too a financial cushion in our savings account, so that when life happens, we're well prepared for it. And then last but not least, again, that percentage that we sent now to investing, that's the money that we now use to again buy assets. It's all relative, and it is a very simple system to set up. So you will learn how to set it up when you go take the Earn for Keeps course. But you just have to do something. Whether you create your own system or you follow the Earn for Keeps system, the cash control blueprint, or something else, but just do something. Like, don't just not do nothing. Okay. Now, I want to just share what life was like before I started implementing the system and what my life was like afterwards. So I remember, again, having those days, where I'm sitting up at the job or getting home and thinking to myself, I'm working so hard, but I just don't have anything to show for it. I don't have a major bank account, I don't have real savings, I don't have investments, but I'm working hard. And I just got tired of it. And again, I was tired of logging into I was tired of getting paid on a Friday, but by Tuesday, I'm less than $100 in my bank account, and I still got other bills to pay. I still got gas that needs to be purchased. I still got food that needs to be purchased. I still had a lot of life to live, but it's like I have a very tight budget to do this on. And mind you, I was reading the Rich Dad Poor Dads, the Think and Grow Riches. I was engaged in those type of activities, but again, I didn't understand that it was deeper than just reading the information. Like the information had to settle. It had to take root. Like the seeds were planted, but it took a while for them to take root. And by taking root, I mean it took a while for me to start taking the actions that I needed to take, i.e., saving, stacking capital, and then investing, buying assets. It took me a while, and it took, and another reason why it took me a while was because again, I still didn't understand how to invest. Literally, I didn't know how to buy a share of stock in my brokerage account. Even though when I look back on it, it's kind of crazy. It's kind of far fetched, but it was literally that one practical skill set that I didn't understand how to do, which is why I didn't do it. But again, I was always broke before payday. I was always, you know, pinching pennies, as they would say. I was tired of being broke, ultimately. And so I did something about it. What happened was I remember, one of my, what did I remember my car broke down. And I remember thinking to myself at the time, like, you know what, bro, like this is, like, what would you do if you had a wife and kid? That's what I remember. That's what I thought to myself. I'll be like, so I started going through this story that what I would do, and w- what I realized was that what I wouldn't do was try to depend on others to make to solve this problem. I would figure it out on my own. And so that was really what the change was. That's where it began, I should say. And then from there, I just started just to make anytime life would happen, I would think about that. Like, well, if you had a wife and kid right now, like, what would you do? Would you be trying to depend on somebody else? Would you be trying to rely on somebody else's power and resources to fix this problem? Or would you figure out a way to rely on your own power and resources to fix this problem? And so that's what I began to do. So the information started to settle. And so I started thinking about what Robert Kiyosaki was talking about, the importance of building a strong asset column. I started thinking about what was being talked about in the richest man in Babylon when he was talking about saving 10%, at least 10%. And then of course I was always quote unquote earning an income through freelancing or through some form of employment that I had. So I started to just apply the things that I was learning little by little, and there were some mistakes, but I just kept going, and eventually I saw myself having now my own money management system, which is what I share with you guys in Earn for Keeps course. So click the link below to get started now. I began to take control of my finances. I began to have a sense of looking opening up. Now I'm opening up my bank account and seeing I'm building real savings, because instead of that savings amount always falling, it was always rising. And then next, I was able to start investing with confidence, because I remember I remember I was in the digital streets, and there was this new account I started following, and I was talking about investing, and they were offering a investment seminar here in Los Angeles, and it was for free. So I said, what the hell? So I remember attending, and I remember there was a Asian guy, Waltz on the Street is what I think his name was, Waltz in the Streets. But shouts out to Waltz, because he was the first guy who helped me understand like how to invest, specifically, how to use my brokerage account to buy shares of stock. I know it sounds, asinine, crazy, but that's literally I just didn't know how to do it. And so he showed us how to do it, and then ever since then it was just like, all gas no brakes. I learned about dollar cost averaging, um, and a whole bunch of other investing principles, and I've been investing ever since. And so it's all going to be relative to how much you're putting into it, but ultimately the point of investing is buying and holding. You want to hold it for as long as possible, at a bare minimum, as Wall Street Trapper would say, at least 10 years. So with whatever shares of stock you buy, you know have a plan to hold it for 10 years. That's the goal right there. Like, that's how you get the compound interest, you feel me? So, that was life before and after. I started implementing the Earn for Keeps cash control blueprint. The 3-step money management roadmap that helped me take control of my finances. It helped me start building real savings, and it helped me start to be able to invest more of the money that I was saving. And I know it can do the same for you. So, again, click the link below to get started. And I'm looking forward to helping you invest with confidence. All right. So if you have any questions, feel free to, leave it in the comments below. Feel free to DM me or email. I'm here to help. On that note, I hope you got some real valuable insight from this. I hope that I was helpful. I hope that I was interesting enough for you to stick around. And if so, then like I said, I'm looking forward to doing business with you. Looking forward to hearing from you soon. Peace.